I knew something was wrong before I even pulled into the driveway, because out where I live in western Oklahoma, nothing changes that fast unless somebody died, got divorced, or made a damn stupid decision. I'd only been gone 5 days down in Fort Worth for a cattle feed convention, same one I'd been attending every August since my dad was alive, and when I came back, there was a line of shiny SUVs parked along the edge of my south pasture like folks were tailgating for a football game. At first, I figured maybe somebody's truck broke down on County Road 16. Happens sometimes, but then I saw the balloons. Blue and white balloons tied to fence posts that used to belong to my grandfather, and I remember just sitting there behind the wheel of my old Ford, engine still running, staring out through the windshield, trying to make sense of what the hell I was looking at. Then I saw the water, bright blue, sparkling in the afternoon sun, and I swear to God, for a second I honestly thought I was hallucinating from driving too long. Right there in the middle of my pasture, where my cattle usually graze near the creek bed, sat a full-blown swimming pool. Concrete decking, lounge chairs, umbrellas, little white safety fence around the whole thing. Even had one of those cheap plastic signs hanging by the gate that said, Cedar Ridge Community Recreation Area. Residents only. I just sat there blinking at it like an idiot, because the human brain ain't built to process that kind of nonsense immediately. A swimming pool. On my land. 52 acres my family had worked since 1951, and some suburban HOA had apparently looked at it and thought, yeah, let's put a damn resort here. I got out of the truck slow, boots crunching gravel, and the closer I walked, the crazier it looked. Kids splashing around. Women laying out in lawn chairs, drinking lemonade. Some shirtless guy grilling hot dogs 10 feet from my property marker like he owned the place. Nobody even looked nervous. Nobody looked guilty. That was the part that got me most. They acted comfortable, like this had already become normal to them. One little girl floated past on an inflatable flamingo while her mom yelled, "Don't splash too much, honey." And I remember thinking, these people genuinely believe this belongs to them. Then this woman in oversized sunglasses spotted me by the fence and waved like we were neighbors. "Oh, good," she said, smiling. "You must be the maintenance guy." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I probably would have said something that got me arrested. "Ma'am," I told her, "this is my ranch." Her smile disappeared so fast it looked painful. She lowered her sunglasses, looked around confused, then said, "No, this land belongs to Cedar Ridge Estates." "No," I said, pointing toward the old oak tree near the fence line. "That survey marker's been there since before your subdivision even existed." She stared at me another second, then grabbed her towel and hurried off without another word. That's when I saw him coming over from the pool house. Tall guy, expensive polo shirt tucked into khaki shorts, fake tan, perfect white teeth, the kind of man who shakes your hand while trying to figure out how much money you make. "Afternoon," he said, smiling too hard. "I'm Bryce Talbot, president of the HOA." "Congratulations," I said. He ignored the tone completely. "Now I understand there's been a little confusion about the property boundaries." "Confusion?" I asked. "You people poured 40,000 gallons of water onto my pasture." His smile twitched a little after that. "Well, according to the development plans approved last year, this parcel was categorized as shared recreational expansion land." I actually laughed that time. "Son, my family's been paying taxes on this property since Eisenhower was in office." He kept trying to talk smooth after that, corporate voice, calm hands, little fake chuckle every few sentences, but underneath it, I could already hear panic creeping in because deep down he knew exactly what had happened. They never verified the boundary survey. They just assumed the old rancher next door wouldn't notice, or maybe wouldn't fight back. That's the thing people like Bryce always misunderstand about country folks. Quiet doesn't mean weak, and patience sure as hell doesn't mean permission. I looked around one more time. The concrete, the music playing from outdoor speakers, kids cannonballing into a pool that legally sat on top of my grazing land. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, I started getting calm. Real calm. Because suddenly I realized something Bryce Talbot hadn't thought through. If that pool was sitting on my property, then legally speaking, so were all the people inside it. And that's when I went from angry to inspired. "Tell me if you'd have handled this differently," because what I did next turned that little HOA paradise into the most expensive mistake this town had ever seen. Now, I want to make something clear before I go any further. I'm not one of those guys who enjoys conflict. I don't wake up looking for fights, and I sure as hell don't spend my free time arguing with neighborhood associations. Truth is, after my wife passed 3 years earlier, I mostly kept to myself. Me and my dog Rufus, my cattle, and a small circle of folks in town who still remembered when this county was mostly ranch land instead of cookie-cutter subdivisions with decorative mailboxes and rules about what color your curtains can be. But Cedar Ridge had been pushing against my fence line ever since they broke ground. First, it was complaints about the smell from my cattle. Then it was noise from my tractors before sunrise. One lady actually called animal control because my rooster crowed too early on a ranch. Every few months, somebody from the HOA would show up pretending to be polite while asking if I'd consider selling before development moved further west. That was their favorite phrase. Development, like paving over open land, automatically made life better. My daddy used to say people who've never worked dirt think land's just another thing you buy and sell. To folks like us, it's memory, it's family, it's blood. So no, I wasn't about to let some gated community bully me off property my grandfather nearly died trying to keep during the droughts back in the 50s. But I also knew yelling wouldn't solve this. Guys like Bryce lived in a world of paperwork and lawsuits. They expected emotional reactions because emotional people make mistakes. So that first night, instead of calling a lawyer, I sat on my porch drinking black coffee, watching lights from that stupid pool flicker across my pasture while music echoed through the dark like somebody had dropped Las Vegas in the middle of cattle country. And somewhere around midnight, I started smiling, because out behind my barn sat 27 head of black Angus cattle that hadn't had access to the south field in almost a week. Early next morning, right around sunrise, I backed my livestock trailer down toward the pasture. My neighbor Earl saw me from across the road and drove over in his dusty old Chevy. Earl's been my closest friend since high school, built like an old oak tree and twice as stubborn. He climbed out chewing tobacco and squinted toward the pool. "Tell me you ain't about to do what I think you're about to do." "Depends," I said. "How funny do you think this is going to be?" Earl stared at me a second, then started laughing so hard he had to lean against his truck door. "Cal," he said, wiping tears from his eyes, "you are either a genius or about to end up on national television. Maybe both." By 8 o'clock, families were already showing up with towels and coolers, same as the day before. Bryce stood near the gate talking to a contractor while kids ran around with pool noodles. Nobody noticed me at first. I climbed down from the trailer, walked over to the fence, and opened the gate wide. Then I whistled. Now, if you've never worked cattle before, let me explain something. Cows are curious creatures, especially Angus cattle. You open a gate somewhere they ain't been before, they're going to investigate like toddlers in a grocery store. The first few wandered in slow, sniffing around the concrete deck. One big heifer walked straight up to the shallow end and started drinking pool water before anybody even realized what was happening. Then the rest followed. Sweet Lord, the screaming started fast after that. Kids yelling, mothers grabbing towels. One teenage lifeguard blew his whistle so hard I thought the poor boy might pass out. Meanwhile, my cattle were having the time of their lives. One climbed halfway into the pool steps and just stood there cooling off while another knocked over 3 lounge chairs trying to scratch its side against an umbrella stand. Bryce came sprinting across the concrete, red-faced and furious. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted. I leaned on the fence calm as could be. "Watering my cattle." "Get them out." "What?" I asked. "This is my pasture." I swear the man looked seconds away from heart attack. "This is private community property." "No," I said, pointing down toward the ground beneath his loafers. "That dirt right there belongs to me. County records will confirm it." About then, one of my steers decided to relieve himself directly beside the pool filter system. Loudly. Earl nearly fell over laughing. Chaos spread everywhere after that. Residents started dragging coolers toward their cars while cattle wandered around like they'd discovered heaven. One cow nudged open the gate to the grilling area and started eating hot dog buns straight off a folding table. Another stepped into the kiddie splash zone and cracked a decorative tile. By lunchtime, the entire pool deck looked like a muddy rodeo parking lot. And the crazy thing was, legally there wasn't much they could do. Because despite Bryce screaming about police and trespassing, every responding deputy who arrived took one look at the county survey maps and realized I was right. One deputy, named Martinez, actually pulled me aside, trying not to laugh. "Cal," he said quietly, "you know this is going to become a circus, right?" "Deputy," I told him, "circus came to me first." Bryce spent half the afternoon pacing around, making phone calls while contractors argued with HOA board members beside the pool house. Apparently, somebody on the development side had used outdated planning maps from before the county updated boundary records 6 years earlier. Long story short, they built the entire recreation area 37 feet over the legal property line. 37 feet that happened to belong to me. And here's the part that really sent Bryce over the edge. I already had drone footage. See, before opening the gate that morning, I flew my little DJI drone over the property and recorded everything. The pool, the signs, the residents, the exact survey markers, every inch of illegal construction sitting on my ranch. By evening, local reporters started showing up because somebody posted videos online of cattle standing inside a luxury subdivision pool while residents screamed in the background. One clip got 500,000 views overnight. Another showed Bryce slipping in mud while trying to chase a steer away from the outdoor kitchen area. The internet absolutely devoured him. By the second day, news vans lined County Road 16. Reporters kept asking if I planned to sue. Already filed, I told them. Trespassing, unlawful development, property damage, unauthorized construction. One reporter asked if I felt guilty ruining a community pool families had paid for. I looked right into her camera and said, "Ma'am, if somebody parks a yacht in your living room, you don't owe them an apology when the carpet gets wet." That clip spread even faster. But underneath all the jokes and headlines, something else was happening too. Folks around town started talking about how developers had been pushing locals around for years. Farmers forced to sell. Elderly landowners pressured with legal threats. Cedar Ridge became the symbol for every rich outsider who thought money gave them ownership over people who'd been here generations before them. And Bryce, poor Bryce, he stopped looking confident real quick. By Friday afternoon, he finally drove up to my house alone. No lawyers, no board members, just him standing awkwardly on my porch holding a folder against his chest while Rufus growled through the screen door behind me. He looked exhausted, sunburned, like he hadn't slept all week. "Mr. Mercer," he said quietly, "we'd like to discuss a settlement." I invited him to sit, poured 2 glasses of sweet tea, and let him sweat in silence for nearly a minute before speaking. Then I asked him one simple question. "Bryce, before you build all this, did anybody from your HOA ever think to ask permission?" He stared down at his tea for a long time after that. And the answer he finally gave me told me everything I needed to know about the kind of people I was dealing with. Bryce sat there staring into that glass of sweet tea, like maybe the answer was floating somewhere at the bottom of it. And after a while, he finally sighed and said, "Honestly, no. Everybody just assumed the land would eventually become part of the subdivision anyway." I remember leaning back in my chair real slow after hearing that, because there it was, the truth underneath all the surveys and legal language and HOA meetings. They never saw my ranch as somebody's home. To them, it was future property, temporary empty space waiting to be converted into something profitable. And maybe that bothered me more than the pool itself. Bryce rubbed his forehead and kept talking, quieter now, stripped of all that polished salesman confidence he'd shown me the first day. Apparently, the HOA board had rushed construction because property sales were slowing down. Cedar Ridge promised buyers luxury amenities, but the clubhouse and recreation area kept getting delayed, so residents were getting angry. Bryce pushed contractors to move faster. Somebody used old county maps, nobody double-checked the survey markers, and by the time construction started, they were too deep financially to stop. "You could have asked," I told him. "I know. Could have knocked on my door. I know. Could have treated me like a human being instead of an obstacle." He nodded slowly after that, but it was too late for apologies. By then, the story had already exploded online. News channels from Oklahoma City were running segments about the cowboy versus the HOA. Some people thought what I did with the cattle was hilarious. Others called me petty, reckless, immature. One woman online said I traumatized children by turning a family pool into a livestock pen. Truthfully, maybe she had a point. But every time I started feeling guilty, I'd remember standing there that first afternoon watching strangers swim on my family's land like I didn't exist. Respect works both ways. Bryce finally opened a folder he'd brought and slid papers across my porch table. The HOA offered to remove the entire pool complex at their own expense, restore the pasture, reseed the grass, rebuild fencing, and pay additional damages on top of legal fees. Earl later told me I should have taken that deal immediately. Most folks probably would have. But the more I thought about it, the more something about tearing everything down felt wrong. Not because I cared about the HOA, no, but because I kept thinking about those families. Kids running around, people trying to enjoy their summers. Most of them probably had no clue the land dispute even existed until cattle started walking through the deep end. The real problem wasn't the residents. It was arrogance, entitlement, the assumption that rural folks don't fight back because we talk slower and keep to ourselves. So I looked at Bryce and said, I got another idea. He blinked. What kind of idea? You keep the pool. I swear the man looked confused for a full 10 seconds. I'm sorry. You heard me, I said. You built it. Residents use it. Fine. But if Cedar Ridge wants this pool, I leaned forward a little then. You leased the land from me. Bryce stared at me like I'd just started speaking another language. Lease it. $10,000 a month, I said calmly. Automatic transfer, due first week of every month. Miss a payment. Lease terminates immediately, and I reclaim full use of my property. Somewhere in the distance, Rufus barked while wind rolled across the pasture behind us, and I could practically see Bryce doing math in his head. Tearing down the pool would cost a fortune. Rebuilding somewhere else would cost even more. Plus, the HOA was already drowning in bad publicity and legal exposure. They didn't really have leverage anymore. You're serious? He asked. Dead serious. That's outrageous. So is building a damn water park on somebody else's ranch. He actually laughed at that one. Tired little defeated laugh. 3 weeks later, they signed the lease. Full legal contract. 30-year agreement with annual increases tied to inflation. My lawyer nearly framed the paperwork out of pride. And just like that, the same HOA that tried to swallow my property whole ended up paying me every single month just to keep using it. Funny how life works sometimes. Now, every summer, I drive past that pool on my way into town. Kids splash around. Parents grill burgers. Lifeguards blow whistles. From a distance, it honestly looks peaceful. Most residents wave at me these days. A few even stop by the ranch during holidays and buy beef directly from me instead of grocery stores. Bryce still lives there too, believe it or not. We're not exactly friends, but we nod when we see each other. I think the whole ordeal humbled him some. At least I hope so. But every now and then, usually late evenings when the sun's dropping low over the pasture, I'll park my truck near the south fence and just sit there quietly for a minute remembering my dad. Because he spent his whole life teaching me that land means responsibility. If you let people take pieces of it without resistance, eventually they stop seeing you as a person attached to that land at all. You just become another obstacle waiting to be removed. And maybe that's why this story spread so far online. It was never really about the pool. It was about boundaries. About what happens when people with power assume quiet people won't push back. Now, I know some of y'all watching probably think I went too far with the cattle. And honestly, maybe you're right. Maybe there was a cleaner way to handle it. Maybe I should have just hired lawyers immediately and let the courts sort everything out quietly. But I'll tell you this much. Nobody in Cedar Ridge has accidentally crossed my property line ever again. Not once. And if we're being honest, every time I see that monthly lease payment hit my bank account, I still smile a little remembering Bryce Talbot screaming while my Angus cattle treated his luxury pool like a muddy watering hole. So now I want to hear from you. Was I justified, or did I turn a bad situation into unnecessary chaos? And if somebody built something on your land without permission, what would you have done? Let me know down in the comments, because trust me, this town's still arguing about it years later.